The time is just gone 9:26 as we continue with the broadcast this morning, and still to come on the show is we will be taking a look at the United Kingdom with elections coming up in the United Kingdom and right across many other parts around the world. We're central to this election, and particularly in the minds of those that stand up for human rights and looking at Gaza and the political positioning of many of these parties. Now, we know the UK, the US as well. It's been a major talking point, even here in South Africa, where we've isolated the political parties that have aligned themselves with the Zionist state of Israel and those that support the Palestinian cause. So these are going to be major issues in the build up to the elections and also determine, as far as particularly as Muslims are concerned, in terms of who do we vote for. And in the UK, we've heard about trust being lost, where Muslim voters have been unhappy with the Labour Party, where previously blindly many Muslims had supported the Labour Party, but the anguish, the anger that is felt by Muslims in the UK over the Israel-Gaza genocide that is unfolding obviously could spell a lot of trouble for parties, even like the Labour Party. And we're going across now to be joined by press officer at Cage. We're joined by Brother Muhammad Mussa. Muhammad, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me, United.
Yes, Jazakallah khairan. And for the reasons that I've been talking about, and I'm sure that this is a major talking point in the United Kingdom ahead of the elections. And again, I spoke about the anger, about the anguish of Muslims looking at these parties very closely, particularly with regard to their position on the whole genocide that is unfolding in Palestine.
It is. That's right. I mean, in the last 3 months, we've seen how Keir Starmer and his Labour Party have acted with double standards. You know, they have failed to call for a full ceasefire, and they have supported the genocide occurring in Palestine. And Muslims across the UK are waking up to find out the reality of who Keir Starmer is and what the Labour Party now represents. And they are not being fooled. And they know that they will cost the Labour Party their votes by standing up for Palestine.
Well, certainly, and also I think just reading about Starmer, where we've heard about he explicitly now talking about backing a permanent or immediate ceasefire, but it's a little too late because we've seen so much. We've seen the carnage, the death, the destruction, and we've seen this genocide reach untold, unspeakable proportions. Mohammed.
Correct. The damage has been done, and as you said, it's little too late because for 3 months or 2 months, he's been supporting the genocide in Palestine, and he hasn't stood up for the rights of Palestinians. And now that he's seen that there's a credible threat against his position in the election, only now has he stood up to say, we now support a ceasefire, and we're calling for peace in Palestine. So it's rather hypocritical that he's now doing this after so long.
Yes. Now, also, we've seen a number of Labour Party MPs, members that have resigned as well from the Labour Party as a result of the party's position as far as this genocide is concerned. And in fact, I've actually heard one comment in particular where one said that, it's fine. I sit in the masjid and I make dua for the people of Palestine, but my party's position says something else. So I'm being hypocritical by being part and parcel of this party. And I'm sure this is a sentiment that is very commonly expressed.
It is, and hats off to those MPs who've stood down and who stood up for what is right. But we now see that the Labour Party are simply doing what they can to garner votes, and they are sort of sacrificing their principles, their morals, and their human rights for gaining over the votes in the upcoming election.
How influential is the Muslim vote in the outcome of these elections, and particularly for the Labour Party? And is this the reason why this Labour Party, or they acting now on fears that Muslims will not vote for them?
It is very influential. So, for example, when we see in London, many Labour MPs, they have a majority of, you know, within the constituencies, there are many Muslims who they rely on for their votes. And 8,000, 9,000 votes is a majority. So by having those votes being taken away, their seats are being threatened by other candidates who the Muslims could potentially vote for.
Yes, I've heard a comment from one senior Labour Party MP where he made a statement saying that Muslims are not only predominantly Labour supporters, but they are also geographically important. Why is this the case?
They are. So, specifically, when we look at London, we see that London is a multicultural city, and there are many Muslims who live in London. Many constituencies, many boroughs, and many areas of the capital where there are a large minority of population is Muslim. So, Labour has targeted these areas for their votes. So, also specifically in the north of England, when we look at Manchester, Rochdale, or Bradford, there are large minorities of Muslim populations in those areas as well, where Labour has historically targeted those seats for the Muslim vote. However, in the last 3 months, we've seen their position on Palestine, and we now know that the Muslims can really threaten and hurt the Labour Party in the upcoming election on this stance in Palestine.
Moment we knew this was coming to bite them at some point in time
Of
because
course,
people don't forget. And especially looking at the Muslim vote, and when people remember statements, people remember what leaders, political leaders say, like we've seen with the ICJ case when South Africa articulated the case. They articulated the case based on what the leadership in Israel had actually said, specific statements. And when we're talking about somebody like Starmer, for example, where he, in an interview, he made a statement. He said that Israel had the right to withhold power and water from Gaza. Now, these are statements that don't go down lightly with people. People will remember these statements forever, and people will obviously react to these type of statements that are being made.
correct, absolutely right. And his statement supports genocide and acts of genocide. And I think he misjudged the mood within the UK amongst the Muslim community, where he thought that they wouldn't react. But now that they have reacted and they've stood up and they said, no, we're not going to support you or your support for genocide. And I think he is now feeling the heat in the upcoming election as well, from both his MPs who have stood down and to the larger Muslim community who have stood up saying, no, we're not going to support you over your stance on Palestine.
Yes. Now, just looking at political options and being participating in the political landscape of the United Kingdom in terms of finding a political home, do Muslims have any options?
At the moment, it's quite difficult because we are stuck between a rock and a hard place, where you have the Conservative Party, who are now fully right wing and Islamophobic, and now we have the Labour Party, who are more or less turning to the right to sort of win more votes. And so it's a bit difficult at the moment to see who we can support or who we can lend our vote to. But I think within our local constituencies, tactical voting would be quite prominent and influential in deciding the outcome of the vote later this year.
Yes, and I'm sure you speak about tactical voting, and I'm sure a lot of strategies. The Muslim community obviously looking at a number of strategies how strategically placed the Muslim vote is going to be in the elections, and we see this now. This discussion that we are having, it's the same discussion that is taking place in the United States as well. And we've seen what has happened to Joe Biden. We've seen some of his campaigns, the disruption of his campaigns as well, but also Muslims in the United States of America in a similar situation, caught between a rock and a hard place, caught between the Republicans and the Democrats as well. So a
Mm.
similar scenario actually playing out there as well. And I'm sure that both countries, obviously Muslims in both countries, watching this space very very closely.
Correct. I mean, within the US, we can see Joe Biden coming under a lot of pressure from within his party and supporters within his party. Wherever he goes for his election campaigning, there are protests and demonstrations, and there's credible evidence that shows that this is having an effect on his popularity and his support. And so, there are many comparisons and comparables to the US and the UK in regards to Palestine and the upcoming elections.
Is this likely to play in the hands of the conservatives in the UK if Muslims don't vote for the Democrats? And we know where the Conservatives stand. We've seen Rishi Sunak. We've seen exactly what his party stands for. We've seen their positioning with regard to what is playing out in Palestine as well. Could it actually play out and just hand them the elections on a silver platter?
There's a possibility that it could do. I mean, yesterday, day before yesterday, David Cameron, who is the foreign minister, he made a statement, unofficial statement, that saying that the UK should recognise Palestine as a state. And I wouldn't really trust his sincerity, but this could be to sort of divide the Labour vote and attract more votes from the Muslim community as well. But at
Yes.
the same time, we know the Conservatives are divided, they're factionalized, and they're weak. So it could play into their favour, but at the same time, it could lead to a hung parliament where there is no majority, and there would need to be like a coalition.
Well, certainly, and also I think when we see over a period of time, and I know we've seen some of the actions that they have been taken against the Muslim community. We've seen certain organizations like Hizb ut-Tahrir as well, where we've seen certain actions being taken. So I'm sure the Muslim community is actually watching all of these developments very, very closely.
They are. It's a very febrile atmosphere here in the UK, and the Muslim community at the same time are intelligent. They're smart. They're clever, and they know what's going on. You know, they watch the news. They're able to understand what political parties stand for and where the stances are, and they're watching this very closely at the same time as well.
Yes, and just looking at finally, Mohammed, Muslim members who are still in government, what is actually coming out? What are they saying about this? I mean, are they saying, are they concerned?
They are very concerned. I mean, we know from the ceasefire vote last year in November, there are a number of Muslim MPs who stood down from their front bench positions in the Labour Party to vote for a ceasefire. However, of course, there were some who didn't vote for the ceasefire, to maintain their position, and they have been quite silent as well. So there is more that Muslim politicians can do to support the cause and to raise awareness of the genocide taking place in Palestine.
Well, Mohammed, Jazakallah khairan so much for that and for taking time out this morning. And I'm sure we will be watching developments as they unfold. And we all knew that this will come to head because it is election year in the
Mm,
UK. And at some point in time, this obviously the bubble would burst, but also at the same time, we knew that these issues would crop up. So we definitely will be watching the US with interest and also, I mean, the UK with interest as well. And like I mentioned, is in South Africa, we're fortunate in that sense
mm,
that we are clearly able to isolate those that have supported Israel in this genocide versus those that have basically stood up. So I think we don't have the dilemma that you are faced with, But
mm.
so we must say Alhamdulillah, and we thank Allah Subhanahu wa Taala for what we have
Alhamdulillah.
in this country. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Barakallah fik night. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Mohammed Mussa, a press officer at Cage, with us this morning, the Labour Party, and we knew this was going to happen. The fear of losing the Muslim vote over what is taking place in Palestine. The time is just gone 9:39. We still have got Itani Rasalanavo with us on his long walk for Gaza. He started off last week in Johannesburg en route to Durban, where he will be finishing off on the 4th of February. So we will be talking to him to find out how this walk has actually gone today. We'll be talking to him out of Ladysmith.